Hi, Randy Roth here. Today we're going to talk about the Great Tribulation and how it relates to the rapture. The Great Tribulation is mentioned by Jesus in Mathew 24 in the Olivet Discourse. Never does he say that it is a 7-year period of time. That is not found in the Word of God. That is created by a man in John Nelson Darby, and concerning Daniel's 70th week. If you want to listen to Daniel's 70th week, I have a video on that one as well. But today we're talking about the Olivet Discourse and the Great Tribulation. The Olivet Discourse is Matthew 24, Mark 13, or Luke 21. And they all start out with the disciples in discussion. They're walking away from the temple. This would be the second temple. And this temple, Jesus declares that this temple will not stand. In fact, he says that not one stone will be left upon another. So Jesus is prophesying the destruction of this second temple. And we know that this happened in 70 AD. So this is the context and the start of what the chapter talks about. And so the disciples then ask him and say, when will these things be? What will be the sign of your coming and the end of the age? So they ask a three-part question. One is the destruction of the temple. The second is the sign of his coming. And the third is the end of the age. And so in verse 4 in Matthew 24 it says that Jesus answered them saying. So Jesus answered their direct question concerning the destruction of the temple. And in each of these chapters, Matthew 24, Mark 13, and Luke 21, they all say the same, they all have the same pattern. And this pattern is that Jesus answers these three questions in order that they were asked. So the first question is, when will these things, the destruction of the temple, where not one stone is left upon another, when will these things be? And you'll see that in every one of these accounts that Jesus addresses the destruction of the temple. In Matthew, it's verse 15 through 21. And you see that he tells us that there's these underlying themes in each one of these, like accounts. So, like the woe to the woman who is with child. Luke has a little different account. He says that when you see the armies encamped around Jerusalem. Well, when the destruction of the temple happened, it all happened when the armies were encamped around Jerusalem. See, Titus encamped around Jerusalem. The Christians who remembered Jesus' word and said, when you see these armies encamped around Jerusalem, do not go back into your houses and collect anything. Run to the mountains, flee. And they did. And a third of the inhabitants of the area escaped and ran to the mountains. 2/3 ran into the city because the city had enough food and storage to last years. And so they all ran in there. However, the Hellenists, they were a group that, look, we want this resolved. We're not going to, stick around. So they burnt down the food supplies. And Titus, his army, was a group of mercenaries. His father, Vespasian, they had started this campaign. It was a 7-year campaign that started in 66 and ended with the fall of Masada in 73. So there's this 7 years that happened, Daniel's 70th week, in which the Titus, the prince, the son of Vespasian took his campaign back to Rome and became emperor of Rome. And so, but prior, Titus had made a covenant with the Senate, with many, to squelch the Jewish uprising. And he went and started this campaign, and he made his way from the north and was just making a bloody mess of the Jews. And he got to Jerusalem. His father had took half the better half of the army, went back, became Emperor of Rome because of the turmoil. Emperor is probably not the word, but he became the ruler of Rome. So Titus has got this group of mercenaries, and when they go in, they're just ugly. They're splitting open the women with child, and letting the babies fall out. It's just disgusting. However, when they went in, what they found was the Jewish, when they finally breached the wall and flooded in like a flood, they found that Jerusalem was starving. And they killed a third of them. And then the other third they took into captivity back to Rome. Okay, so this is, when the Romans, took over, I mean, they had already taken over due to, way back when, what's his name? Alexander the Great. That's a fascinating story. That occupation had began way back then, and it was a peaceful takeover. The story is incredible. But, anyways, back to the Olivet Discourse. Jesus tells them, answers their direct question concerning the destruction of the temple. So often we're told that this section is not historical but futuristic, that in the future, when we see the armies encamped around Jerusalem, today's warfare, they don't just encamp around. If an army had camped around, then you just simply take them out with a couple, big aerial bombs. You just simply don't do that type of warfare anymore. Otherwise, an airplane's going to come in and bomb them, and your army is totally devastated. However, that's not the case with the Romans. They encamped around. They eventually breached the wall. They went in there and they destroyed Jerusalem. It was desolation. The definition of abomination, according to Ezekiel, is somebody who's not circumcised in heart. This is like Ezekiel 44, like I think verse 8. Somebody who's not circumcised in heart is an abomination if they go into the temple and the areas of the temple. Even if you're a Jew and you go into the court for Jews, but if you're a Gentile and you go into the court of Jews, where only Jews are, then that's an abomination. And here we have an entire army, abomination of desolation, going in and destroying. Every single part of this prophecy that Jesus gave is totally fulfilled. Now, is that preterism? No, that's not preterism. That's understanding. That's rightly dividing. There's 3 divisions here. When will these things be? That's the destruction of the second temple. What will be the sign of your coming? So now he's going to talk about the sign of his coming after that. And says, immediately after the tribulation of those days. So you tell me, oh wait, no, the tribulation was over then. No, that's simply not the case. If you look at what it says this will be the worst time ever for Israel. The time of Jacob's trouble, which Jeremiah 30 and 31 tells us about the time of Jacob's trouble, in which 10 and 11 tells us they are scattered to the nations. What happened? They saw the armies, they ran, scattered themselves to the nations. And Jeremiah 31 verse 8 tells us that they are later gathered. When did that happen? That happened in 1948. What happened? Well, prior to that, Hitler took out 6 million Jews. So you have 3 million taken out by the Romans to begin with. In a bunch of inquisitions in the interim, another 3 million. You have approximately 12 million Jews taken out during this period of time. There's only 6.5 million Jews that live in Israel today. A more worse time ever isn't even on the scope of radar. It's not imminent. You cannot have a more worse time that's imminent for Israel than what's already happened. So you have this time of Jacob's trouble where Israel is scattered to the nations. 12 million Jews are killed, 6 million by Nazi Germany. This is called this time that they're scattered to the nation is called the Jewish Diaspora, which they are scattered. That's what a diaspora is, that they are scattered to the nations. However, in history, it's the Jews that made it back to the land. And Jesus said, this generation will not pass away. Well, that's how it's recorded in the Greek. However, in the Aramaic, which was later translated to the Greek, and that's what we have today, the Aramaic, you can look that up in Aramaic, where there is no translation errors, because that's what Jesus spoke. And it says that this tribe, this people, will not pass away until all these things are fulfilled. See, it had appeared that Israel had passed away. They were scattered to the nation. Okay, so let's go back to Luke's account. It talks about the time of the Gentiles, that Jerusalem will be trodden down. Jerusalem is trodden down, and completely trodden down, when Hadrian becomes ruler of Rome, and that's in like 132 or 140 AD, where the Jews are declared off limits. You cannot go into Jerusalem if you're a Jew. In fact, if you do, you're dead meat. So Jerusalem is off limits. The time of the Gentiles starts here. You can say, oh, well, it might have started earlier. Well, this is when it's been declared off limits. And it continues to be off limits for centuries after that. It's not until she gets her land back in 1948 that the time of the Gentiles is over. So every single portion of this passage that Jesus prophesies about the destruction of the second temple is totally fulfilled. Now back to immediately after the tribulation of those days. Okay, so we know that in 1948 the tribulation was not over yet, because 6 million Jews, that's more than what Rome took out. And so you can't say, hey, look, that's worse, that's less, the Rome deal is less. No, the whole entire diaspora, Jewish diaspora, is the Great Tribulation. It is for Israel, it is for Jacob. And it is not over yet until Israel is completely recovered. And it's talked about in Hosea, that everyone will be returned. And we still have like 6 million Jews in the United States, maybe more. So what does it say? Immediately after the tribulation of those days, the sun will be darkened and the moon will not give its light. Why is the sun darkened? Why is the moon? And that's what that event, that the aftermath of whatever it is that causes the sun to be dark, the moon to not give its light, is what's going to cause the end of the tribulation of those days. So it goes on to say the stars will fall from heaven. The powers of the heavens will be shaken. The powers of the heavens. Powers, dunamis, where we get dynamite. The heavens, Oranos. Oranos, Jesus knew what Oranos was. It was the Greek god. There was the Romans, they taught all their Greek gods. There was Jupiter, Mars, Venus. Those are all Greek gods. But the one that overlooked them all was Oranos, which was the Greek god of the heavens. So the powers of the heavens will be shaken. Oranos. In 1850, there was a discovery, and it was named after Oranos because it was the planet Uranus, and it was named after the Greek gods as the other planets were. 10 years later, in 1860, there was another discovery, and it too was named after the Greek god and the planet Uranus. And that is uranium. Uranium was unknown until that time. The powers of uranium will be shaken. The stars will fall from heaven. Nukes are many stars. They work off the same power, fission, fusion, as the sun. A sun is a star. And if we know that if one star was to fall from heaven, it would consume the earth. However, the stars will fall from heaven. The power of uranium will be unleashed. It will cause a nuclear winter, which the sun will be darkened. The moon will not give its light. There's 24 accounts in the Word of God of this particular event. We can see in the Old Testament where it talks about this event. I believe it's Zechariah. It says that the eyes will melt in their sockets. The face, we saw that happen in Japan after it was the aftermath of in Hiroshima and Nagasaki when the nukes were hit there. It also is demonstrated. Well, I won't go into movies that are fictional, but anyways, so here we have a nuclear winter. We have this event is what will bring about the end of the tribulation of those days. Immediately after the tribulation of those days, you will see this nuclear winter, because the stars have fallen from heaven, the powers of uranium is released. And then, after that, it doesn't say immediately after now. Yeah, that was immediately after the nukes happened. Then it says, then you will see the sign of the Son of Man coming from heaven with great power and great glory. Look up, for your redemption draweth nigh. So, the idea here, and the purpose of this video, is to rightly divide historical from futuristic, and to show that, this is not to rightly divide does not put you in the category of being a preterist, but I am very much a futurist here. The end has not happened yet. The end of the tribulation of those days is not over yet. Alright. Hope that is helpful. More to come. We'll talk to you later. Thank you. Bye.